All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Oh no, you're pulling a Nessie there. Your mic went out. Can't hear anything.
This is ridiculous.
All right, just do it from the AirPods.
At all? A little bit?
Yeah, it's fine.
I can't hear you. So
You can't hear me?
start off the live feed. Let's see if I can fix this thing. I got nothing.
All right.
I got nothing. I
You
got
can't.
two computers set up and I got nothing.
Oh, geez. So,
Take it, Dave. Start us off, man.
all right. So, today we're going to talk about collaborative leadership, and we're going to start by talking about school initiatives. And for anybody out there listening, we got a question for you, and we want you to be as much a part of this show as we are. So, what is a successful school initiative, or what's the most successful school initiative you've ever been a part of? And, why was it successful? So, if you want to drop that in the chat, we'll be putting stuff out here later. For those of you watching on Twitter, if you want to comment, go over to the YouTube link and, comment, and we'll be dropping a link in there later if you want to join the show. So, what is the most successful initiative you've ever been a part of, and why was it successful? So,
Give me something here.
all right, I got you.
Oh my goodness.
So apparently we're making life hard because Unlock the Middle's on at the same exact time.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You choose us. You get a little more out of this one. I don't know what Unlock the Middle is doing. I have no idea. But just let's get talking before I lose my entire feed again. So where'd you leave off, Dave?
So, yeah, we're talking about collaborative leadership, and started by just asking, what's the most successful initiative you've ever been a part of, and why was it so successful? And for anybody who's listening or watching, drop a comment in the chat, and we'll be posting a link out here later for anybody who wants to join live. So, um, you know, I guess we'll start with you. Are there any school initiatives that you've been a part of that were completely successful, and any that you can think of?
Yeah, this is a tough situation because I'm trying to think of like full school initiatives that are something that we played around with, that actually everybody jumped onto and were a part of, and that's a hard thing to answer. Um, going back 17 years, I don't know like one initiative that stands out as like successful initiative for a school, and like, while things might have been pushed out with PD, I don't think it lasted throughout an entire year. I remember one time we tried to do like emotional learning, not social emotional, but emotional. Like if I ask a question about, for example, about the 1920s. Okay, if I ask a question about the 1920s, what would your thought be? How do you think people felt during that time period based on the information we're learning? As a socialist teacher, I use that all the time, but like this was an initiative they wanted to roll out. Did not work, did not last. The PD was awful. This was like one of my first couple years teaching. I think the most successful initiative I've been a part of now would have been like more of like Chromebook use and technology, because I think everybody was on board in that situation. I, now being in this chair, understand like initiatives are lame. Don't give me an initiative that I have to do. However, I'm trying to roll out an initiative in my school with the idea of PBIS and positive behavior interventions and supports. And while I'm calling it an initiative, I feel like it's more of an approach for success than it is an initiative. But we have to look at it as an initiative because that's where it starts from, right? So for me, I don't know really many that have been introduced that are, gaining ground and then continuing. What about you, Dave?
And well, first, I think it's a little fair to judge anything that started like prior to the past 2 years. So, we'll understand that there's certain things that maybe would have been more successful if they weren't derailed by just the disrupted school year. So, like, we'll give that a pass. But I'm with you in terms of technology. Like, I wasn't a part of it, but in the district that I'm in now, they're one-to-one rollout. So they were already 5 years in by the time I got to the school that I'm at now. So and now I'm at the district 10 years. So they've been doing this like 15, 20 years. So I would say that was a pretty successful initiative. And then we talked about getting a common LMS, right? And just kind of making it streamlined for students. And everybody in the district is on Canvas now. And so in terms of technology, yeah, I've seen that happen. In terms of pedagogy or like just equity initiatives or things like that, I haven't really seen that take off. Just like you said, you see pockets of teachers that take it and run with it, but district wide, not really. So I guess that leads to the next question is, we've been in education a long time, right? So um, 16 years, 17 years, and in all that time, seeing very few initiatives take off and flourish. Why? Right. So, like, what's going on that's not allowing that to happen. And so from my perspective, I'm actually going to go back to not my current district but one of my former districts. They were talking about doing physics first, and I have no problem with physics first, and the way that it was presented to us was um we're getting freshmen to do more, to understand physics, to perform at a higher level than at the time we were getting our juniors to do it. And so for me, I was like, yeah, I'm all about it. you know let's see what this is, what this program is, and if you can make me a better teacher, yeah, sure. But
Mhm.
then, like, we sit in on the program, and it was terrible. And my supervisor at the time, like I said to him, I was like, this is terrible. Everybody agreed. Like, everybody that was in the meeting, there was not one person that had something positive to say about it. 2 weeks later, oh, I got this great program. Blah. I was like, okay, so it's not about the program. We're pushing physics first. And, just that, like, he wasn't upfront and honest about like why we were investigating the things that, so just starting off, it kind of put all of us on our heels. And it's just like, all right, just tell me what's happening, and, we'll deal with it, and that honesty and doing things for the right reason. So it turns out that at the time, they were offering a lot of money for freshman academies. And, to move biology, to move chemistry, you need plumbing, you need gas, you need to equip labs. And it was just way easier to move physics. So none of it had anything to do with educational value. It was all about securing funding for like this freshman academy. And, so like that kind of puts a bad taste in your mouth. Like, once as a teacher, once you see that dishonesty, and it's, you're kind of wary of the other things that are being presented. So that, I mean, that's been my experience. And um you know the district that I'm at now, they're very progressive, but like they let things happen organically. So we haven't really had too many district initiatives. There were a couple that started around equity and inclusion prior to COVID, but like I said, a lot of that stuff got derailed because of COVID. So you can't really judge the success of it based on that. So I guess like jury's still out. We'll see what happens when things kind of get, to a more regular routine. How about you?
Do you think the term initiative is just like a negative term to begin with?
I I I really don't have a problem with the term, so I mean that's what it is. It's an initiative, right? You're trying to get something off the ground, you're trying to do something new and I hate to use the word innovative because it's cliche, but like that's what districts say. We're doing something new and innovative and you know if you just approach it like, hey, we're going to do something that's going to make the lives of our teachers and our students and our community better.
Mm.
I don't care what you call it. You call it an initiative, you call it a program. The words really don't matter. I think it's more how people interact around it and
Mhm.
how it's supported.
So now the goal here is to talk about the collaborative aspect of leadership,
Sure.
right? The teacher role, the administrative role, and everybody else in between. So when you say that, right, the attitude has to be there. So is it the administration's attitude towards pushing out the initiative, or is it the teacher's attitude of receiving this initiative so that they can use it in their classroom? Because and I still think, I know I'm not in the classroom, but I still think myself as teacher first. You know this. When I think about something, oh, here's something new that I have to now put into my practice. Here's somebody else tell me how I have to teach who's not in the classroom. I get all that. But like once that attitude shifts and you start thinking, well, here's something new, I've lost you as leader, as school leader, I've lost you. Right. So now that spreads. How do I stop that? That's where the problem is. That's why I'm afraid like word initiative is so negative.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's such a loaded question because it varies district to district,
Teacher
so
to teacher as well.
yeah, absolutely. And, the relationship that I have with my principal, director of curriculum, supervisor, it's very different than, the relationship that other people have. And, for me, like, I trust that they're doing what they think is in the best interest, and, I trust that they're doing it with honesty and integrity and for the right reasons, and I've been there 10 years now, and they've never approached me or anything I'm doing in any other way, so, they do get that goodwill from me. So if they're saying, "Hey, look at this with an open mind," even if it's
Mm,
something that I'm not excited about,
mhm,
I would do it because, they've earned that from me because that's just the way they've treated me. I know there's people that aren't in those situations. So, that's really a loaded question. And, you know, the flip side of that coin is you've had teachers who've been in education, you know, even 16 years, right? I've seen so many different things that this is the next big thing, and you just wait it out and it goes away, right? Wait 3 years and then there's the next big thing. So, there's not that sustained focus on here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's how it's good for kids. This is the support that you're going to get from us. Um, so um yeah, so for me, I think some teachers have been jaded because they've tried these things, they've gone out of their way only for it to be abandoned. The other thing that's really important is time.
mhm.
And we've talked about this before, and you have an hour like prep time in the middle of the day, like you're going to spend that on this new initiative, or are you going to spend that developing lessons for your class, providing feedback to your students, and doing all of the daily activities that are required of a teacher. So, if it's important enough to move forward with, it's important enough to make the time for. And I approach my students the same way. If it's important enough for us to do, it's important enough for us to do it during class time because if I'm expecting them to do it outside of class, well, maybe it's not done in the nature in which I intended. They don't have the support that I know that I provide to them, or I should say, they may not have the support that I know that I can provide to them. So I think we look at them as different things, but the way administration approaches teachers should be very similar to the way that teachers approach students, and that's not to say that, you know, and maybe I'll catch flack for this, but that's not to say that all voices are equal, but they do need to be heard, right? Because there's certain information that you're privy to that I'm not as an administrator. And so like I'll defer to that, you know. Um and as long as you're hearing me out and say, you know what, Dave, we can't do that. Can't get into the details of it, but just understand there's reasons that, behind the scenes that things like that just can't happen. Okay, you know and it's the same thing with students, right? Like,
Mhm.
with students, I'll tell them if they're giving me feedback and asking for something that they think is beneficial in the classroom. Maybe it's something that I've tried before, and I'll say, hey, look, when I did that, you know it didn't work out the way that you would expect it to, right? Here's what I saw. Here's how the students responded. So that's why we're not going to go in that direction, right? That's not to say that like I don't do anything that they suggest, because I make changes in the classroom like all the time. And you know, like everybody should have a say in how things are shaped, maybe not be the deciding factor, but um there should be lead time going up to these things. You know, get parents involved, get students involved, get teachers involved. And as long as we're consistent with the message of why we're doing it, how we're doing it, how it's going to benefit, I think we'd be on, better footing.
Mm. I appreciate that, and I'm just trying to think because again, as I'm listening to you, as I'm thinking about my goals, right? So I'm going to keep going with what I'm trying to push out going forward, and it's PBIS. I think that's really important to have that positive interaction with students, so that we are focusing on all kids and not just the quote unquote bad kids, right? So I'm trying to work through this initiative, and I'm trying to go as slow as possible. Um, I don't want to be pushed to the wayside. I'm doing surveys. I'm creating my PBIS team so we can get input from a variety of teachers. So this is where the collaborative aspect comes in. Correct? We
Hmm.
it's not top down. It's here's the idea. So I guess maybe it is top down to start with. Like, here's the idea. We're noticing a situation in our school where we think this might be something good going forward. And like when we think about this idea of PBIS, it really is pretty simple, right? The goal here is to have your positive words and affirmations throughout the school. So instead of having your classroom rules be like, don't chew gum, change your wording of it to, in our school, we respect something, right? So
Hmm.
instead of saying don't, we look at it as more of a positive. So it's going to be a shift. This is going to be what we do going forward, because we want to change the rules from no running in the halls to we respect our hallways. You know what I mean? So we respect the people around us. Um, so I want to make sure that this is collaborative, and I'm creating this PBIS team so that we're all on board together on this journey, because I think it's important to have their voices, because they're the ones in the classroom. My staff is going to tell me these are what we see in our school as rules and procedures that are extremely important to us, that we can all vibe with, right? I'm not going to make it. I'm asking the teachers for their input. I'm asking students for their input. I'm trying to be as collaborative as possible so that we're all on the same page. So, Dave, if I brought this to you and I said, I want you as part of my PBIS team, right? Now you're part of the initiative. Where does it go from there? What's your goal as now like a major player in how this goes forward?
Yeah. So a couple of things. First, I do think that there needs to be an element of top down. And when I say that, administration, right, central office, they set the vision for the school, right? That's They're saying this is we've listened to the parents. This is where they want our school going. So here are the initiatives that we feel are going to get us there. And so that's what you've done, right? And PBIS is one of them. All right. Now, one of the challenges that I have sometimes with this collaborative generation of rules, right? I know I bring this book up all the time because it's an awesome book. It's called Troublemakers.
Hmm.
So people have been conditioned to schooling since kindergarten and sometimes even before that with pre-K programs. So when you ask them to generate rules, are they really telling you what they value, or are they regurgitating what they think you want to hear? So before that collaborative space can happen authentically, there needs to be that trust. All right.
Hmm.
And I've told this story before about, like, the students that like just roast me in their feedback. That didn't happen initially. And not that like anybody likes to get roasted, but like, it's just I'm very happy that they feel comfortable enough that it is a safe space for them to speak their mind. And I attribute that to one student, right? And he kind of set the tone and stuck his neck out and said, "Let's see what this teacher does. They say they care about what I think. I'm going to tell them exactly what I
Hmm.
think." And it was met in the way that I intended, right? Like I said, yeah, I wanted your honesty. You gave me your honesty. Thank you. Here are the valid points that you brought to the table. These are things that I'm going to address and change. Here are the things that I know, like, you don't have to agree with me, but here's why they're in place and they can't change. So I establish that trust first. So as that has to be there. And if that's not there before you have this group that you're charging with, okay, now shape this model, you're not going to get their honest opinion on which way it should go. They're going to sit there. They're going to say, you know what, AJ, um, here's all the things that I heard you say. So that's what I'm going to spit back at you. Right. Um, but now for me personally, um, you know, what would I do? I would ask my students. First thing you do, like,
Hmm.
you ask me, what do you think? I said, you know what? Um, I'm going to talk to my students and I'll come back to you, and I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear what they think. And, um, you know, I would suggest that, maybe we get some students on this committee as well. Um, you know, and once again, not that, and this is where I think people misinterpret, right? They think that just because you're listening to students, like, it doesn't make you like weak, or there's not that there's no accountability, or it's just they're the people that we're serving. We need to know their experience, right? So, like, everything for me goes back to, how is this impacting their experience? Like, how have these things negatively affected them? And then, what can we do to change that? So we had an incident at my school. I guess it's going back like 3 or 4 years now. And
Hmm.
there was, it was in the paper. So like, there were racial slurs and swastikas in the bathroom. And you know it was appalling. And I thought I was connected to my students, and it wasn't until I directly asked some of my students if they've experienced racism, that they actually started telling me their stories. And like, we were cool and they trusted me, and we had a great working relationship, but there were some things that were still guarded. And it's not until you actually ask, how is this directly impacting you, that you get the full story. And without that, we can't make policy that's going to make this situation better, whatever that situation is.
Hmm.
So I think it all comes back to, what are the students dealing with? What are their needs in that moment? And how can we best serve them?
It's fair. And that's the thing. I want to make sure that when we're putting something together, it's not just tell me what I want to hear.
Yeah.
I want to make sure it really is like, this is what's going to help you. This is what's going to help your students. This is what's going to help the school going forward. Like, I don't want it to be, and I don't know if there's a way that I could even make it so that, they don't try to just make me happy. That's not what I want.
Sure.
I want to make them happy. So, that is going to be the hard part. But hopefully, if there's a relationship there, if there's trust, if all that kind of lines up together, then we can have that conversation that points everything into the right direction. Hopefully, the other teachers will feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and not just sit back and say they're fine with whatever they want, right? Whatever
Yeah.
you want, you can do that. That's a good idea.
Yep.
I want the feedback from everybody.
Yeah. Well, you're fighting an uphill battle because you went to a new district in the middle of remote instruction, not even starting at the beginning of the year. So
Right.
and still we're not at a point where we're building relationships the way that we did prior to COVID.
True.
All right. So, like, people are still in survival mode. And like a lot of that stuff isn't going to shake out until, who knows when, but like, there's still there's still things that need to fall in place before we can do any of these, wide scale initiatives, because there's just not the mental bandwidth.
Hmm.
Right. So if you're asking me for my honest opinion right now, my honest opinion is I want a nap.
Right. I'm with you. Like, again, this is kind of why I'm going very slowly with this. Like, this was never going to be a thing that we start like just jumping into right now. This is going to be a thing that we introduce, that we take a look at, that we analyze, that we determine whether it could be effective. And then for September 22, 20, and then throughout the 22-23 school year, then we really get moving on it, because we had the 4 or 5 months of prep to really get off the ground and feel comfortable that when we start in September, this is not just like, hey, September PD, here's what we're going to do. Like,
Sure.
we introduced it. We thought about some ways to look at it. Started with the surveys. I'm a little behind because of the year that it's been, but now I'm happy that we're making moves. Teachers have been surveyed, got a lot of great feedback. Students are getting surveyed this week into next week. I know whenever you listen to this, you have no idea when that is. It doesn't matter. But students will be surveyed. And then from there, team is created. This way, by like mid-March, like, we really have an idea as to what we can do going forward. So one of the things we talk about, Dave, let's say the initiative's in place now, right? We started it, feel good about it. We're making moves, we're making waves. What do you want to see after it's begun? As the teacher, you got the ear of the principal, you got the ear of the leader, whoever it might be that's running this. What do you want to see going forward once you guys have the initiative off the ground?
Yeah, and once again, I relate everything back to the classroom, and I think that it should be approached in the same manner. If something is not going well, I just want a commitment that will investigate it and will change it however it needs to be changed. So like, just that commitment that this is the intent, we are going to honor the intent. um we're not just going to give you PD at the beginning. This is going to be a sustained effort where you're going to get the support that you need throughout. You're going to get time, whether that's pull out time, whether that's, um, instead of doing like a faculty meeting, maybe, that's that time, or like the professional development days, like, it should be coherent, right? So it's not something different. So maybe like this year, every single PD day that we have is dedicated to this, you know? Like, that would be something that would be beneficial, because time is the most challenging thing, right? If you're asking teachers to do this outside of their normal workload, if you're asking them to do it on top of everything else that they do outside of class, it's not going to happen. So a time commitment, a commitment of support, if resources are deemed necessary, make them available. Um, and really, as a teacher, that's what I would want. And and I'm sure there's things that you would want from your teachers as an administrator, right? So, what do you want from your teachers when you're starting these initiatives?
All right. So before I answer that, let's just go through yours because I think the checklist would be very similar, right?
Okay.
So you said open for change, if needed,
Yep.
open lines of communication, support,
Hmm.
time, and then resources and growth opportunities, including PD. As the leader, I feel like the change is extremely important, right? If we see something not working, that we can communicate and make the changes that are necessary, right? I think that's really key because again, as a team, we're going to evaluate what's working, what's not. Hopefully, the teacher will have the ear of their colleagues, and then they can bring it to the table. We can discuss that and be open to change and kind of figure out how change would look, right? That time is going to be there because if this is something that we're pushing out in the school, I'm going to give you time during faculty meetings, during PD opportunities that we bring in. Like this has to go hand in hand. That time and PD has to work together. And of course the support, right? And the willingness to try. I think that's all important. I think those things, from my point of view and from a teacher point of view, I think we're all on the same page, right? If we want it to work, those are the things that we need. I'm not asking any more than that because I think the only thing I would add really is that willingness to try. Like, and if it doesn't work, then let's change it. Um, Again, as we went back to the beginning of the conversation, it's so easy to just say, "Ugh, initiative, I'm out." Right? Don't give me something else to do. When some initiatives, like even though they seem small or they seem too large, they're quite important to what we're going to do as a school. So I like what you had said there. I like those 5 things: change, communication, support, time, and then resources and growth opportunities. I think we're all on the same page completely.
Yeah. And look, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that, there are some districts, there are some regions that are dealing with challenges beyond their school,
Of course.
right? And we have to be in an area that will allow for change, right? Not trying to pass laws that ban books or ban teaching and, you
Hmm.
know, like,
Hmm.
so that you can't, like, there's no amount of collaboration that can overcome something like that. So, let's just put that out there. But if you're in a community where, they're open to change, um, in order for that to happen, yeah, it's just really it's that trust factor.
Yep.
That everybody's like going in the same direction, even if I don't agree or
Hmm.
completely agree. The fact that I know that, if I see something, it will be addressed. Yeah, I'm going to be more open to trying things, And look, my own initiatives, it's taken me 6 years to get to where I am in what I'm doing. So I understand it doesn't happen overnight. And I think that instant gratification, just that mindset of, oh, well, we're 3 months in and nothing's changed. Well, no, don't expect it to. Like, we have to have realistic expectations, And so, all right, here's something that's out of our control.
Hmm.
Like, if we want to know how is this impacting like the students' experience, how are you monitoring that? How are you communicating to teachers that, hey, yeah, look, what we're doing is working? Because nobody wants to be part of something and put in all this time and effort if it's not moving the needle. So, like, how are you communicating with the community, with teachers, with students that, look, yeah, we are moving the needle?
That's a great question because I think that's always the hard part, right? How is this working? So when you look at your grading practices that you changed, when do you start seeing the change? When do you start figuring out that it's working? I think that constant communication is extremely important, right? Looking at, I guess, data, like we have to use data, we have to use surveys, we have to, look at, I'm going to use our situation again. We have to look at discipline overall. Are we still having lunch tension? Are we still having problems in the classroom? Are we still having suspensions? Are we still doing after school? Like, is that changing? Even a little bit. Are we recognizing kids for the good things they're doing versus recognizing those kids who are the troubled kids? Like, those are all things we have to think about. So looking at, I don't know, I'm going to say referrals. We don't really use referrals, but behavior referrals versus positive referrals. Like, where are the numbers going to change? So there's got to be a way to survey and keep data and have those open lines of communication to kind of figure out from teachers, like making a Google form on my part, so I know, like, daily or weekly or monthly, this is what it looked like from each classroom. I know it's extra work, but again, if we want to see how it works after, especially year one, we have to have that data. We have to have that information out there so we can even share that with our families. They have to see it too.
Yeah, and so I am so happy you didn't say anything about performance, because performance is always a lagging indicator, right? So when you're making these changes, the first thing that you're going to see is mindset shift, right?
Mm.
You're going to
Mm-hmm.
see reduced stress, less anxiety, increased happiness, right? Like, those are all the things that I started seeing, even when performance didn't change all that much, right? And then said, okay, great. Like, they're thinking about class differently, which means they start approaching class differently. And then ultimately they start doing better. So, like, that was the last thing to come,
Mm-hmm.
so I teach a course that students have to take, and a lot of them don't like taking it, right? So I teach physics, and they come in thinking it's going to be one of their harder courses. And prior to making this shift, it was very contentious. Like, I had a lot of students that hated being there,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're seeing that shift. I had like about 10% of my students report that they just did not like coming to class prior to me implementing these reforms.
Mm.
Now, on my most recent survey, I had 0% say that they don't like coming to class. And like, that to me is not that, like, you always have to be happy with everything, but the fact that they're not dreading sitting in that room, it definitely impacts the way that they engage with learning. It impacts the way that they engage with me. So I think that needs to be at the forefront, and we need to start pushing away these standardized test scores and
Mm-hmm.
not putting so much value on them. I think that's part of the reason we are where we are in terms of an educational system right now, not necessarily your school or my school, just kind of in
Mm-hmm.
general.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that grade focus, that score focus, and kind of losing sight of why we do what we do, and going back to that. You're going to see an increase in everything else before you
Mm-hmm.
see an increase in that. So
Right.
I like that you're not using that as an indicator.
No, the whole goal of this for me is to make the school a place where kids feel they belong and not a place they feel they have to go to each day. So while you're talking about your classroom and kids wanting to be in class, it is the same thing for me, because look, middle school kids get bored very easily. So what can I do to make it a place where, you know, like, I don't want to say like bribe them, but give them incentives for doing the learning, for doing the right thing, for practicing, you know, citizenship, and practicing like what it means to be a person, not just a student who gets grades, who then gets either rewarded or punished because of grades. I want to reward them for being good people so that they continue to pay that forward, and use it in a way that really brings about a positive culture of the school.
So, and once again, I know your intent because I know you, but when When people say good people, who's the judge of that, right? Because you'll see some people act out bad behavior to get change,
Hmm.
right? Because they're noticing an injustice, they're noticing a deficiency, and they're speaking up to get change. So, you know, who's judging bad behavior? And that's something that when we're doing this, we have to be really cautious of, because not everything that we deem as bad behavior is for a negative reason, right? Like,
Right.
so
Hmm.
they're doing it to raise awareness of something that could be fixed.
Right.
And, everything that a student does is telling you something,
Hmm.
right? You just have to listen.
Right.
And, it's, I'll tell you from experience, it is exhausting, because like when you remove carrots and sticks, it's a lot of conversations. It's a
Right.
conversation about choices. It's a conversation about like, what consequences those choices will have, how they'll impact their long-term goals, their short-term goals. And, that they're not used to that. So setting up that system where, you know, what you mean by good people. Um, I know you're coming from a good place. It's just something to keep in mind.
Right. I mean, look, my what I see as disrespect in a classroom is not the same thing you would see as disrespect. Everybody has their feelings on what it means to be disrespectful in a classroom setting. When I say good people, I just mean like the basics: respectful, kind, caring. You know, those, I'm going to say, buzzwords that we
Sure.
put in schools. I'm not even looking at like behavioral good
Hmm.
people. I'm just talking about like putting them on the right path to take care of
Yeah.
themselves and people around them.
Yeah. And look, respectful is a two-way street,
Hmm.
so um like you can't expect students to be respectful if they're not respected.
Hmm.
And so that's a conversation that has to be had with staff as well, because there's a lot of do as I say, not as I do. And we
Right.
have to make sure that we're setting an example with our behavior, not just with rewards.
Right.
So like just that consistency, right?
Absolutely.
And when you talk about an initiative, like kids can smell BS,
Right. Right.
and
Hmm.
if they say, oh yeah, okay, they're saying this but like they're not doing it. And it's like the teacher who has a strict cell phone policy but is texting every 15 minutes,
And I
you
was just
know
thinking the same thing. Absolutely.
like that. If you're going to be that strict, never look at your phone,
Hmm.
you know
Right.
and look, that's something that I've changed my view on now that I'm a parent. um you know Look, my kid's school called today while I'm in class. I'm gonna look at my phone, and so granted, I don't look at it nearly as much as students do. And like
Correct.
we have that conversation that look, you need to check, you check. If it's getting in the way of learning, then we're gonna have a conversation about it.
Hmm. Right.
But I think anything that's too rigid or like zero tolerance or anything like that, it just leads to inconsistency and it becomes arbitrary and meaningless.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So Dave, I think we tackled like the first part here of our series, right? I don't know if we talked about this in the beginning because my audio was awful to start with. I don't know how it sounds now. Hopefully it's working.
Sounds a
But
lot better.
great. It makes me happy because I don't know what I was doing here. We're going to be going into several parts with collaborative leadership. This is something that Dave and I find extremely important in our schools, and like we want to make the change. This is where it starts. So we're going to have several episodes directed toward collaborative leadership. So our part two will carry over and we'll look at collaborative leadership in a different way, right? I think this can kind of sum up our buy-in, right? Right, Dave?
Hmm.
This is part
Yeah,
one, buy-in and finding ways to get the buy-in together, not just, hey, I'm the leader, do what I'm telling you.
sure.
So Part 2 is coming, so we're going to focus here. I don't even know what today is, Dave. Today's
the 10th.
10th.
We will be
We got
back on
2
February
weeks.
24th.
There we go. Thank you, sir. So 24th, we'll be back. Collaborative Leadership, Part 2. If you are listening to this on the replay, please make sure you reach out to Dave or myself. Let us know your thoughts. Hit Dave up at David Frangiosa. I'm at AJ Bianco. And we want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear where you want to go with this. We have our ideas, but of course, you guys can shape it as well.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to join us live in the studio, reach out, and we'd be happy to have you.
Absolutely. DM us, and you are welcome aboard to share your thoughts and feelings about this. So with that, David, I think it's time that we put a bow on this. So listeners out there, thanks for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you and taking your thoughts and questions and all that in Part 2.